From Zero Hedge, Ron Paul warns America's on the verge of something like 1989 Soviet system collapse. The godfather of the Tea Party movement and perhaps the most prominent right-leaning libertarian in America, Ron Paul, believes the economic boom the United States has experienced under Trump will be a bit of an illusion. Mr. Paul sees inequality, inflation, and debt as real threats that could potentially cause a turmoil. The country's feeling a lot better, but it's all on borrowed money, and that the whole system's an illusion built on corporate, personal, and governmental debt. It's a bubble economy in many different ways, and it's going to come unglued. In a recent interview with the Washington Examiner, Paul said, "We're on the verge of something like what happened in '89 when the Soviet system just collapsed. I'm hoping our system is the Soviet system." Wow. We have ownership of these countries, but it's not like the Soviets did. I think our stature in the world and our empire will end, and that's when, hopefully, the doors will be open. The crumbling of America's overseas empire, as Mr. Paul calls it, could be a chance for the libertarian movement to captivate the country's imagination by 2020. The fact that the system is coming apart could be a big opening for the libertarians, Paul claims. However, it is not just Trump administration's foreign policy that could play a part in this. I think the foreign policy is a total disaster. Trump's approach sounds good one day, but the next day he's antagonizing everyone in the world and thinks we should start a war here and there, he said. The former politician and host of the popular Ron Paul Liberty Report podcast has been a vocal critic of the NSA surveillance program, the USA Patriot Act, and the war on drugs, and the government's fiscal policies as a whole. Interestingly, the topic of one of Mr. Paul's recent podcasts was Bitcoin. Interesting. The government, for its own reasons, monopolized the creation of money. Money originated in the marketplace. Let people sort it out, he says. Apart from criticizing Donald Trump, the Tea Party's brain, as some journalists have called him, criticized Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Mr. Paul considers Sessions to be a threat to civil liberties. According to Paul, Trump's foreign policy is a total disaster, as well as the war on terrorism and the war on immigrants, as Mr. Paul puts it. He went as far as calling these policies authoritarian fascism. The former U.S. representative, author, and physician is cautiously optimistic about the future of the libertarian movement. Although he sees Trump's policies and what he predicts to be the imminent crumbling of the American economy and the country's overseas empire as an opening for libertarians, he admits the movement has a lot of work to do before American voters accept a true libertarian. Still, Paul thinks having a popular candidate in 2020 is very possible. We as libertarians have some work to do before voters are going to accept a true blue libertarian, but I think moving in that direction and having a popular candidate in 2020 is very possible. If they only hear our message, I know they would choose liberty and sound money and freedom and peace over the mess we have today. And that is from Zero Hedge. Right-wing publication and another right-wing voice, because everybody always says, "Oh, you're a socialist or you're on the left," and you always quote leftist leaning people and leftist leaning publications. This is from The Week. I just quoted Ron Paul in the last article. This is from The Week, which is very, very Republican and right-wing. Okay, The Week opinion: the American empire is crumbling. This is from Ryan Cooper. America's power and global influence have plummeted like a stone during the Trump presidency. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson recently claimed otherwise in the New York Times op-ed, but he is obviously wrong. The American empire is crumbling. What Donald Trump is destroying is a product of the post-war years. In the years after the Second World War, America constructed what amounted to a global spanning empire with the active assistance of Western Europe. The immediate justification was to build a military coalition capable of countering and containing the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. And an important secondary objective was setting up a solid economic system to ensure prosperity, manage trade, and avoid depression. I've always said that about having a reserve currency like the United States has, which is the dollar. Ensure prosperity, manage trade, and avoid depression. The empire carried out a slew of atrocities and war crimes and a variety of coups, pointless and failed wars, and abuse of powerless, poor countries. Elsewhere, America made a cynical peace with brutal dictatorships. Africa and the Middle East especially did not fare well. But when it came to Western Europe, the US, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, it worked out pretty well. Western Europe, in particular, which was a smoking crater after the war, was rebuilt quickly under the astoundingly generous Marshall Plan. American policymakers realized that letting Europe fall to pieces in the interwar years was a disastrous error, even on the self-interested grounds. If democratic liberal capitalism was to survive, there was simply no alternative to setting up a functioning international system that actually provided economic and military security, for rich capitalist countries at least. Let capitalism blow itself up and you get Hitler. But pick Europe up, put it back on its feet, and they'll have some money to buy American exports. The American imperial framework consisted of overwhelming strength of the U.S. military. Get that. We're going to refer back to that. Disproportionate funding of and deep influence over the United Nations and its various sub-agencies. Can't talk today. Plus international economic institutions like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the U.S. dollar as global reserve currency, and U.S. Treasury bonds as key global asset. And most importantly, the mostly accurate perception among Western powers that sheltering under the American security umbrella was a good idea, a good deal. In retrospect, the fall of the Soviet Union was a massive blow against the system. For a time, it proceeded on autopilot, but the lack of any superpower counterweight enabled George W. Bush's swaggering belligerence and the abuse of minor European alliances to carry out the disastrous Iraq invasion. Now they talk about it. Meanwhile, triumphal neoliberal capitalists smashed several more large cracks in the system by destroying what remained of international financial regulation and the managed trade system, setting the stage for the kind of global financial crisis and depression not seen since 1929. Oh, how the chickens have come home to roost. It's like your girlfriend telling you why she cheated on you 5 years later after you got married or something like that. It's too late now. Now we have Trump, our own addle-brained would-be dictator. And Western powers are dealing with the shocking possibility that America is best considered an enemy. Wow. In his first foreign policy tour, while cozying up to the brutal Saudi monarchy, Trump offended Western European leaders for no reason, especially Angela Merkel, who said afterwards that the era in which we could rely completely on others are gone, at least partially. Trump also badly cracked the UK alliance simply by impulsively retweeting a British fascist, stoking fury across the country. Trump is also letting the State Department rot. Only 61 out of 154 positions needing Senate confirmations have been filled, and many key positions don't even have a nominee, such as ambassador post to South Korea. The department has been hemorrhaging top-level career staff. Trump doesn't care. I'm the only one that matters, he said when asked about it. The American empire was built by people who recognized that often the best way to exert power was through non-coercive means. Trump represents a different tradition, a pinched, ignorant, aggressive, insecure tradition that insists only on military force and chest-thumping belligerence matters. As I said above, it is worth emphasizing the horrific carnage American imperialism has wreaked in places like Guatemala, Vietnam, or Iraq. But this kind of chaotic collapse is perhaps the worst of all worlds. The likeliest non-authoritarian nations to fill some of the power vacuum are Germany and France, but they are trapped in a grotesque failure of a currency area that will sap their strength indefinitely. The real core of the U.S. empire was always its decent relationship with Western countries. And so as that goes, so will the bulk of its power. But it will retain more than enough strength to completely wreck poor countries for the foreseeable future. The most obvious successor to the U.S. is China. Wow. It's good to be right, isn't it not? And it's a safe bet that sort of empire will be no better than the American version, perhaps worse in some ways. Future presidents will have their work cut out for them just salvaging any sort of workable international system from the Trump disaster. And that is from the week. Ryan Cooper. I said this back in 2005-ish, I would say. Actually, I had believed it earlier in 2003 because I knew the Iraq war was a mistake. And by the time 2005 rolled around, I had researched enough to figure out why they actually did it. It became obvious why they did it. And it became obvious that China was going to take advantage of their era. And that was in 2005, 2006, that China was slowly but surely pressing its advantage and taking advantage of the U.S.'s fumbles in the world, and basically the financial crisis. Because if there was one thing that the rest of the world depended on the United States to do, even more than the military, was actually run a solvent, equitable financial system amongst the globe and not dip its filthy beaks into the till, which they did. And that set off all kinds of chain reactions. So, with them, they could put up with them beating up on little countries and enforcing peace. You can put up with the bully as long as he's paying you. What happens when he doesn't pay you anymore? Then it becomes a problem. And the banks, the investment banks, with the derivative crisis, turned the U.S. financial system into a smoking crater that they have been trying to backfill with zero interest rates, and the Fed has been dumping assets into the crater, trying to fill it, trying to level everything out so they can rebuild again. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be possible. And basically, China and the rest of the world has been basically eating America's lunch. And what's left of the empire, like we said before, with Ron Paul, that the U.S. empire it's crumbling now, and what Ron Paul says that by 2020 it will probably collapse, which is Johann Galtung said the exact same thing, that he said the U.S. empire would be in collapse by 2020. Now you have, which I did post, and I had a whole lot of white people disagree with me. They give me hell for it. But now you have Ron Paul saying exactly the same thing, who's right-wing libertarian, and you have the weak, which is, I've always hated the weak, but which is extremely right-wing and I think borderline fascist, but that's just me. The weak is the Washington Examiner and the weak are no left-wing liberal rags. They're extremely right-wing, and they're saying the exact same thing that the left-wingers have been saying for years. So when the right and the left both line up, that means it's right down the middle. Now, the empire collapsing, what does that portend for the United States? That is a damn good question. And you know what? I don't have no answers. So if you're looking at me for answers, I have no clue because when things go into free fall, you don't know how they're gonna actually break up. So I don't have a clue. I think that it's gonna be a slow, steady decline. I don't think it's gonna be an extreme collapse, but you're already seeing it, man. You're already seeing it. They basically threw poor people under the bus, trying to maintain what little power that they have through the military. and they're going to do it on the backs of the average Joe. So all those poverty articles I put up to expect more in 2018. It's just, it is what it is. You know, I know black men are happy because of cuts that will stop black women from talking a whole lot of shit. I know that's their main reason. You know how it is. You'd rather, sometimes men would rather burn down the house, man, just so the woman can shut the fuck up. And then they realize that the house is burnt down. So I understand you guys being saying good, let it fall. And the MGTOWs, I know the MGTOWs are basically dancing a jig over the flames, over the ashes. You know, the MGTOWs say it's gonna burn anyway. Get some popcorn and marshmallows, and you might as well have a party over the ashes. And MGTOWs say, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die. So I guess when it gets to people get put in the corner, is they'd rather see the whole thing fall rather than put up with the bullshit that they have to put up with on a daily basis. So in that sense, I can't blame them. It is what it is. There's really, there's nothing you can do about it. I was listening to Turd Flinging Monkey. He was talking about the demographics of Europe. So evidently he's been looking at my channel, because I did post that. And I don't even know why black people push back against the demographics of Europe when white men see it plainly. Sometimes black people want to keep white supremacy alive so that they'll have something to rail against, and they'll disagree. It's like your opponent trying to concede the chess match, and you won't take their concession. It's funny. It is what it is. But like Cerulean says, I love niggas, because if I didn't, I wouldn't do this. But anyway, folks. This is going to be my first video, or second video, whichever order I actually put these up, for 2018. I hope that your New Year is prosperous, because you're going to need it. Tighten up your belts, tighten up your chin straps, put on your shoulder pads, because you're going to have to take some hits. But anyway, I'm going to end this one, because like I said, it's going to be a long year, and you guys are going to hear plenty of this crap from me. So there's no sense in rubbing it in. It is what it is. With that, I'm going to bounce off of here. This is BGS out, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.